Hello everyone, it's Joseph here, and today I have the honor of hosting a very special guest. She's an acclaimed author who has written more than 20 books with over 60 literary awards to her belt, and that is very impressive. Mrs. Ayn Cates Sullivan is the brains behind the amazing Celtic bestseller Nimue, freeing Merlin. Mrs. Sullivan, thank you so much for joining us. So, what birthed the idea of writing this book, Nimue?
Well, here's the book. I'll show it for a minute here. So there's a whole series, and it started, 30 years ago, probably, when I was accepted to King's College London, and I wound up studying actually first Irish mythology, and then I wound up studying Welsh and Cornish and all kinds of mythologies. And it was just such a fun period of my life. And at a certain point, I felt that it was important to share these stories, especially because in the Celtic world, women are really pretty powerful. If you look in the west coast of Ireland, the old stories, or if you actually, the Viking women are pretty powerful too. And I didn't have a lot of really powerful female role models at the time. So I thought, oh my goodness, I need to write these down and give them to my daughter and my friends. And also, what also happened is that I wrote them for my kids, and then my friend Belle Ducray saw them and read them and said, I actually need to illustrate these stories because they're so important to me. And so the adventure began, I guess it was really about 2012 when we first started putting the stories out, and they've been very popular. Yeah.
That was well said. I saw your website. It showed your earlier books, the Legend of the Grail series.
Yeah, there's a whole series called Legends of the Grail. So you can look on either my website, which is AynCatesSullivan.com, or I have Imaginosophy.com if you want to play with the characters, or I have, you can see all of them on Infinite Light, or all the major bookstores too, Amazon, Barnes and Noble, and so forth. You can find them. Yeah.
Yeah, so moving on, while reading Nimue, I saw a strong, determined woman in Nimue herself, one who goes all out to solve her problems. She's tried to get to the top and eventually became the Merlina in the court of King Arthur. So I was curious, do you relate to the character of Nimue personally?
I do, actually. There are some autobiographical parts to it. My father, when I was writing the book, my father had just died, and I was staying with him, and so I was processing that, and that's part of what happens in the beginning of the book with Nina. And she goes back with her mother, goes back to the UK to find her roots and start a new life. So that part's pretty autobiographical. But then I met a healer. I actually, literally, when I went to London, met a healer who did a past life regression with me. And I realized that I had these lives in the UK for thousands of years, apparently. So I then became even more interested in the characters and what was happening. So in the book, Nina, who's just some modern, everyday sort of person, has the experience of going back in time to the 5th century or earlier and meeting Merlin. And so the whole King Arthur realm comes to life in that other world.
That explains a lot. The conviction was present in the writing. So, did you grow up in the UK?
I actually grew up in the United States, but my uncle lived in London. Well, actually, initially he lived in Edinburgh, and then he moved to London. And so every summer I would go. And so when I was 12, I decided that I was going to live in the UK. And actually, I moved to the UK when I was 21, and I got my doctorate there, and I married a Scot, and I had my daughter there. So I wound up about Nina's age, actually, moving to the UK. So a whole world opened up for me there. So I am really, I live in two worlds. I also, like my characters, I live in two worlds.
That's very interesting. So the Celtic folklores you were told while growing up, Is that what sparked the inspiration to write Celtic myth like Nimue?
Yeah, well, when I was growing up, my grandmother, I called her Nana, would tell me stories about our ancestors that lived in Northumbria and in Scotland. And so I grew up listening to the stories. And then on my dad's side, his father, they're Welsh. So most of the King Arthur stories come from the Wales, although you can get them from France. You can get them in many places, but the most of them arise out of the Welsh tradition. So I grew up on the stories. I heard them. We had our family Bible. We actually had relatives that were buried in the garden on the farm. So I knew I had this lineage, but it wasn't until I was a teenager that I got to go. And of course, I was really excited to go and find my roots. I think it's really important, whatever lineage you're from, to go and find your roots, because there's something really magical about it. I call Britain and Ireland my dreaming country, because there's something there. My indigenous roots, my native roots are there. And a lot of the characters that I talk about are pre-Christian. So they're really, especially in my earlier books, like the Kalia, she's like 10,000 years old. And, some of these stories are very, very ancient. So you're really literally going into these roots. And I think it's important for all of us to go, well, what are our roots? Like, where do we come from? And what is dreaming us now into existence? Like, what is that power, that love? I mean, because really the ancestors are drumming. They're like, they want us to live and thrive and remember our stories. They want us to be rooted. And I kind of think our culture doesn't necessarily support that. They want us to be divided. What's the point of being divided? I've never understood that. We're all one, really. So I think going back and finding these goddesses, some of them, they were considered, in Nimue too, like she's like, am I a sorceress or am I a good person or what am I? And so she has this struggle in the book because she's not really sure if she's good or not.
So what's your take on Celtic gods, Greek gods, and Roman gods? Who do you think is the most important?
There's a lady, she's the sort of head of the New Age movement. Her name was Madame Blavatsky. She said that everybody comes from Mount Meru, which I think is Africa. But the oldest traditions that I know personally come out of Ireland, and the first goddess that appears is Anu, which is sort of my name, which I kind of like. But it's Anu. Some people call her Danu. And there's still traditions there. Like today, we're recording it's spring equinox, and they would actually do a ceremony to light up the goddess, to bring her to life, because in the ancient traditions, the goddess is considered life itself. She brings life to the world. And I was like, well, that's so fantastic. And the other thing that I really like about these traditions is it's not just about the goddess, because she then gives birth to Billy, who is, or sometimes it's Dagda, depending on the tradition. But let's say Dagda, she gives birth to Dagda, and then she has a partner, and then they have children. So you have one, like the one that's recurring is called the Mabon, and he's almost like the Christ light in a way. He's like the new sun that comes, and he shines the light on everyone. So it's really a beautiful, this is ancient in this Celtic world. You have the Trinity. It's the Trinity, but it's really this moving three-petaled flower or star, where you have the mother and the father and the child. And this is life. This is life, where the male and the female love each other and they love their child into existence. And I was like, isn't that beautiful? It's equal. It's accepting. It's bringing everybody together. So I love that.
So back to the book, you did something remarkable with this novel, Nimue, and I have to acknowledge that the realism of the story, it made it very captivating. by adding Nina to the plot, that's Nimue's present reincarnation, you made the story seem very authentic. So what inspired that realistic touch to a Celtic myth like Nimue?
Well, I feel on a hero's journey, if you follow like Joseph Campbell's hero's journey, usually you start out in an ordinary world, and that's so your reader can come with you. And then you're in this ordinary world together, and then all of a sudden Morgan shows up, right? Morgan's a little wild. She's got a green dress on. You're not sure if she's good or evil or what she is, and so now you have this otherworldly element, and in the hero or heroine's journey, you try to push it away. You don't want necessarily to go on this wild journey that's going to change you forever. But Nimue, Nina, who realizes that she's Nimue, Nimue is a sorceress from previous life, and she was the one apparently that sealed Merlin in a tree, and she has to go back in time to release him and to release herself in order to save the world. That's the idea behind it. And if you think about it, I think it's true for all of us. If we talk about gods and goddesses, like what are gods and goddesses? I mean, to me, they're energies, they're archetypes. And so what archetype are we working with? Are we working with a creator goddess? Are we working with the sorceress? Are we working with the wizard? Are we working with the fairy? Are we working with the dragon? Because all of these archetypes carry something different. I think they're all part of our psyche. They're all part of who we are and our totality. But for Nimue, she historically, if you just actually, mythological history, in one version of Nimue's tale, she's an evil sorceress who gets beheaded. In another version of the tale, she's the lover of Merlin, and she's a fairy, and she's very beautiful, and she's a lady of the lake. And when I was holding these myths together, these ancient myths, I was like, well, how do you bring them together so that you have this, much more of a holistic sense of who Nimue is? And I think the book, I don't want to give the book away what happens, because she does have these two parts. But that was the idea, is like, how do you bring some of these characters? The other one that really changes, I think, in the book a lot is Morgan. Because, Morgan also in mythology was the evil sister of King Arthur. But she's also a healer, and she's also the one that takes him back to Avalon when he dies. So she's another one of these ambiguous characters. And what you find in the 5th century, when you go back to that time period, this is when the Roman invasions have happened. They've killed off the Druids. So the indigenous magical people, kind of like the Aboriginal people, have been killed off. And now you have these Romans. So actually, King Arthur is actually, in some versions, he is a Roman soldier. In some versions, he's actually, it's a title. It's a title for the king who's defending Britain, who's defending the land. But he is always the red dragon. I always love dragons, so he's always the red dragon. But the thing that I love about Arthur is that he always upholds what's good and true. I mean, you can't sit at the round table if you're not a good man. And then in this book, I started saying, well, okay, so we know that the Knights of the Round Table, they're like the Templars. They're holding the template of Camelot, the template of what's good. What about the women? Are they all evil? Are all women evil? So I was challenging that and saying, well, what if the true counterpart, like Guinevere, there are 4 Guineveres. Guinevere was originally the May Queen. What happens when you start to find out that these are magical wise women, and that's who they really are, and that there's a magical wise woman in each of us? There's a King Arthur in each of us. There's the good masculine in each of us. There is a beautiful goddess in each of us, and there's a magical child, So anyway, that's what I was trying to bring through.
So I take it you were busy with a book launch in the previous weeks. Yeah, so do you have any upcoming works that your followers and people who appreciate your work should look out for?
Yeah, there are 3 that are published in the series. That's the Legend of the Grail series. So we've got the Irish ones and the Welsh ones, and then you have Nimue, which is the one we're talking about. This is the novel. This is the first novel in the series, and that one is very well, it's British. I should say it's British. The next book in the series, I just finished it. I just sent it to the editor yesterday. I'm so excited about it. It's called Riddles of the Ancestors, and it continues on. You still have Nimue, and you still have Morgan, and a new character comes in who's Ganaida, who's actually the twin sister of Merlin. So she becomes this main, this really pivotal character. And so this is now no longer just a personal quest. This is about saving the earth, about saving the planet. And so it's a really fun book. And that should be out, I hope, well, probably by 2025 that will be out. And meanwhile, I have Imaginosophy.com too. I made cards to go with, so you can play with all the characters and learn more about. There are a lot of Celtic deities, and so I have in my books I have glossaries so you can figure them out. But in Imaginosophy.com, if you want to know more about Cuchulainn of Merhevna, or Benedifiana, or who was Connor, who was Nimue, or who was Queen Maeve, you can go and play on that site, Imaginosophy.com. Yeah,
I'll be sure to check out Imaginosophy.com, and you all should check out Imaginosophy.com to learn more about Celtic characters and the British culture, which is very interesting, by the way. Very, very interesting culture.
I want to say something about it right before we go off. Is that there's one thing about Britain, and I can say this because I'm coming from America. I love America, but I'm going to Britain, and like I said, it's my dreaming country. And there's one thing that I realized when I was in Ireland and Britain, and every country has something wonderful about it. America's big and it's vast, and nature, and I'm sure Africa's fantastic. The thing about Britain and Ireland is that these are the places that people from all around the world have gone to for 10,000 years or longer, apparently, to learn magic. And that's why these stories, these magical stories, they catch you, and because they come out of those lands. It's a living landscape that you can tap into. Yeah.
So we only have a few minutes left, and it's a shame that this has to come to an end. It's been a really delightful experience having this live chat with you, and I'm so glad you're able to join me here. Thank you very much. And you watching this, you can also benefit from the brainchild of Mrs. Sullivan here. Nimue Freeing Merlin is available on all major book retailers, and also I'm going to include a link to the book in the description of this video, so be sure to check that out. Mrs. Sullivan, once again, thank you so much. That will be all for now.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thanks for speaking with me. Bye.
Bye.